Lawyers announce a $1 billion settlement between USC and survivors of a former gynecologist charged with sexually abusing hundreds of students.
Dozens of homeless people are forced to leave Echo Park, a place many call a safe haven when they have nowhere else to go.
And volunteers try to make a difference for Asian Americans who may be afraid to go out alone. See It Live starts now.
Today's announcement comes with a statement that harboring a sexual predator in an institution comes with a high penalty and should not be tolerated.
A $1.1 billion settlement announced this afternoon involves more than 700 plaintiffs who say they were sexually abused by former USC gynecologist George Tyndall. Good evening, I'm Liza Montesabian reporting from Hawaii.
And I'm Olivia Novato reporting from Hermosa Beach. Reporter Jillian Carroll is following the latest developments in this historic settlement and joins us now with more.
This is the largest sex abuse settlement payout by a university in American history. Attorneys who represented the hundreds of women described how the university failed these former students.
There are literally thousands of women that man assaulted in that health center. And worse, and I want this to be clear, USC and senior administrators at USC in the health center and otherwise knew. The press materials that USC put out in 2018 that this was somehow a mystery to them were a damned lie. And we proved it. Because the problem at USC is culture. They put prestige, fundraising / money, and the university brand ahead of the well-being of its students for 30 years. It cost them dearly.
I'm one of the first women to see him. I saw him in 1990. And none of these women here should have ever seen him after I saw Dr. Tyndall. Like many, I was inexperienced in what a gynecological exam would entail. So when he closed the door and locked it, I thought it was odd, but what did I know? When he treated me, I didn't realize that was all just a big lie. And those lies and that shame followed me for the rest of my life.
Audrey speaks about being assaulted by George Tyndall in 1990. I was born April of 1993. So we were talking about decades of the perversion of the patient-physician relationship, and something that we all know could have been prevented. But USC equally perverted the sanctity of the student relationship and the trust that parents and students put in an institution's hands when we choose that institution to further our education.
In an email this afternoon, USC President Carol Faulk reacted to the settlement, saying, quote, "I am deeply sorry for the pain experienced by these valued members of the USC community. We appreciate the courage of all who came forward and hope this much-needed resolution provides some relief to the women abused by George Tyndall." More survivors shared their reaction after it was announced.
This settlement shows institutions everywhere that there is a great price to pay if they choose to ignore abusive doctors.
Although I do not wish to be here today recounting this painful and traumatic experience, I am here because I hope this will be a turning point in the way universities and college campuses treat sexual abuse. It is my hope that this settlement and the upcoming criminal proceedings deliver justice and put an end to this nightmare for so many women.
George Tyndall first began as a gynecologist back in 1989 and stayed at USC until 2016 when he was placed on leave. A year later, Tyndall retired with an undisclosed financial settlement. In 2019, Tyndall was charged with 29 felony counts. And it was shortly after that when a federal judge approved a $215 million settlement between USC and some of the survivors. George Tyndall has pleaded not guilty to all charges. He was stripped of his medical license and is now awaiting trial.
Activists are continuing their fight to keep Echo Park Lake open. The public park, which is also a homeless encampment, has been fenced off and closed temporarily. Today, protesters faced off against law enforcement to stop the removal of more than 100 unhoused people who call this lake home. A small group of protesters gathered at the park this morning in a tense standoff with the Los Angeles Police Department. The park is now surrounded by a nearly 6-foot fence and law enforcement stationed around the area. LAPD says it is working to find anyone living in the park safe housing, but some Echo Park residents say the unhoused have every right to stay.
In the next day or so, what's going to happen is if people don't leave, the incident commander for different shifts are going to make a decision on whether they're cited or physically arrested. I'm being told by the service providers that they have in excess of 80 or 100 beds available. So the goal is to get them into those beds, not the police.
The disappointing thing is the lack of access to services that the city has, and especially during the pandemic when there's no access to libraries or internet for a lot of people. That's what bothers me more than like wanting to go to the park and not have to think about the problems that are happening in the city.
Captain Stabile said the encampment's residents have 24 hours to leave the park. Those who stay risk getting a citation or arrested.
Tonight, we are taking a closer look at the rise in anti-Asian racism. In the past few months, racially targeted violence against the Asian community has seen a sharp increase. According to Stop AAPI Hate, a nonprofit organization tracking incidents of discrimination against Asian and Pacific Islanders in the U.S., almost 3,800 incidents were reported during the first year of the pandemic. Women report incidents 2.3 times more than their male counterparts. Verbal harassment has been the most commonly reported type of incident, while businesses are where many incidents of discrimination happen. LA County Sheriff Alex Villanueva showed his support today for the Asian community.
We stand united against hate crimes and stand united with the Asian community. And I would definitely want to encourage everyone within their sphere of influence, if you see something, say something. Call, let us know about it. If it's a hate incident, and we'll define the hate incident as someone maybe yelling racial epithets for things like that doesn't rise to the level of a crime by itself, we still want to document it because those hate incidents typically involve someone who's a suspect tomorrow for a hate incident that occurred previously.
Sheriff Villanueva said those who want to report hate crimes anonymously can call the nonprofit LA Crime Stoppers.
Grassroots groups in Southern California are taking action against Asian American hate crimes. The hashtag #StopAsianHate is circulating throughout social media. The Chinese Young Professionals Network is helping organize a protest in downtown LA this Saturday.
We no longer feel safe in the country where, supposed to protect our safety. I think this sentiment is also very dangerous because it can carry across not just on the street, but into workplace, into other places. I know there are people who never go out during the pandemic. They see those hate letters.
We wish to, unite together and using the social media to express our thoughts. And we want to stand up and speak out our words. We want to stop the Asian crime. This is the most strongest wish right now.
Protests against Asian American hate crimes are happening in cities across the country. A petition is also circulating in California asking Governor Newsom to help stop violence against Asians. The Los Angeles protest will begin this Saturday at noon in front of LA City Hall. Tension and fear are building as the number of hate crimes in the U.S. against Asians soars. The debate rages in Atlanta, where a gunman killed 8 people, 6 of them Asian women. Police are downplaying a racial motive, enraging Asian American advocates who say this is just one incident in a long, painful history of abuse. Here are just a few examples. In the early 20th century, the Chinese American community in San Francisco was blamed for spreading the bubonic plague. During World War II, Asian Americans were forced into internment camps. And 2 white men killed Chinese American Vincent Chin after mistaking him as Japanese. The men accused Japan of stealing U.S. auto industry jobs.
Violence and hate, that dates back to when the first Asian peoples came to the United States. And you can trace that to what was happening in places like New York during the China trade with the United States early on, right, really in the period after the Revolutionary War. There are a lot of folks today who saw that shooting and were shocked by it. But if you go back into American history, this is not a new thing. 1871 in Los Angeles, right here in Los Angeles, in Chinatown, was one of the largest mass lynchings in American history. But that's not something that most people probably even know.
The hate crimes rise and fall, right? They're not steady. They rise and fall with global conditions, especially for Asians, because Asians are oftentimes identified with their homelands. And then there's the whole other dimension of, not just being identified with the homeland, but identified with, all of Asia. There's this larger stereotype that goes beyond individual nation or individual ethnic group around race, that all Asians are alike.
Many Americans don't even know about the long history of abuse against Asians. Many who study the spikes in hate crimes point a finger at former President Donald Trump. They say he stoked anti-Asian fires by continually calling COVID-19 the China virus.
In a historic choice, Governor Gavin Newsom appointed East Bay Assemblyman Rob Bonta to fill the remaining term of State Attorney General. I'm Taylor Milliner reporting from Los Angeles. He will be California's first Filipino American in that position. Bonta is an advocate of criminal justice reform and says he's committed to pursuing justice for all residents.
Too many Californians face human trafficking or other abuse or mistreatment. Too many Californians face unfairness in the many broken parts of our criminal justice system. And they deserve more compassion, more humanity, and a second chance. Now more than ever, we need leaders in government and leaders in law enforcement who will build bridges with communities that have been othered, that have been persecuted, that have been targeted. And if I have the honor of being confirmed as Attorney General, that will be one of my top priorities.
Bonta is awaiting final confirmation by the California Assembly and Senate. One of his goals is to address the recent increase in violence against Asian Americans. Asian business owners have been negatively affected as well. One Chinese restaurant owner recalls the struggle when the pandemic hit.
You could definitely tell it getting slower here since January. And then of course when the shutdown came, the week before we had the shutdown, on Friday nights we usually get pretty busy in dining, and it was empty.
Tomorrow, Asian businesses are asking for special support. They created an event called #HaveYouEatenYet. The idea is to get as many people as they can to eat at AAPI-owned restaurants.
USC student groups have been working to address the wave of violence against Asians. One organization is focusing efforts on grassroots activism in surrounding LA communities.
We're trying to address some of the more systemic issues that are causing these hate crimes, and find alternatives to policing, and make sure that we expand mental health resources rather than increase policing. There are a lot of different ways to advocate and do activism. Do you want to connect other people? That is one way of advocating or being an activist. And in other ways, if you want to literally go and protest and camp out somewhere, and where do you feel you would make the biggest difference?
As the USC community figures out how to advocate for minority communities, some students are calling on the administration to focus on prioritizing mental health over policing. Meantime, the response to hate crimes is also happening among celebrities. This week, comedian Jay Leno issued an apology. In a statement released Wednesday, Leno said he was sorry for the anti-Asian jokes he's made throughout his career. Leno said, quote, "There would be two sides to the discussion. Either we need to deal with this or screw them if they can't take a joke. Too many times I sided with the latter, even when in my heart I knew it was wrong." Leno said even though he believed his jokes to be harmless, he's now aware of how wrong his actions were.
The uptick in crimes is terrifying many members of the Asian American community. Groups like Compassion and SGV, based in San Gabriel Valley, are stepping up to protect the AAPI community in LA County. Volunteers are offering to accompany members of the AAPI community while out in public. Those interested in starting a compassion project to promote safety and community in their own city can apply by going to the Compassion in Oakland website.
It's so inspiring to see all of the incredible work people are doing, especially during this time.
I know it's been such a dark and difficult time for a lot of people, and it's nice to see the community still working together to do something good.
For sure.
That's it for this Thursday. Thank you so much for watching.
From everyone at See It Live, have a great night.